In our application, we don't want to simply nslog when we press our I or detailed disclosure button, but we want a segue to occur. So let's do that. Navigate to your storyboard. And remember, although our final task may seem complicated at first, programming is about breaking down complicated tasks into smaller and simpler pieces. That's what we're going to do here. Our first step was to make anything happen when our accessory button was pressed. Then we will expand to have a segue occur, and finally we will pass data again using our prepare for segue method. To first register the segue, we are going to control drag from our outer space table view controller, so we're going to make sure we have that selected in our scene, to our space data view controller, so we'll be able to tap on our indicator and go to this view controller. Well, one of the easiest ways to do this is to make sure you have your view controller selected in your scene, because you want it to be from your view controller to your view controller and not specifically on some item in your view controller. So go ahead and select it in your scene and drag this over to the table view you want to transition to or create a segue to. So I'm going to create a push segue, and because this segue is going to be called in code, we actually have to give it an identifier so that we'll be able to locate it inside of our code. So in order to do that, select your segue here, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're on the attributes inspector, and we see that it gives us the type of segue that it is. So we're currently using a push segue, which uses our UI navigation controller. We also want to give it an identifier, and we can call this push to space data, which is the view controller we're going to be going to. So I'm just going to copy that for now to make sure I get it in correctly. But it's just going to be called push to space data. And now we're going to have to go into our OW outer space table view controller.m file. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling the inside of the method accessory button tap for cell, a method in order to make that segue to occur. So we're going to simply we're going to remove our nslog statement here. So let's make this segue occur. We're going to add a line of code here, and we can say self, and we're going to call the method perform segue with identifier. And we can use that identifier name we just added to our storyboard, which was push to space data. And now we have to pass a sender, and we see that its argument type is ID, which means that it can be any type of object. And we're going to pass in the index path for now. Now, we're not going to be using this right now, but just in a minute, when we implement our method prepare for segue with identifier, we're going to be able to get access to this index path in order to figure out which space object we're passing. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and run our application and check that this is working properly. So now when I press the indicator, we see that I'm now able to go to a different screen, but it's still not updating my information properly. So it's now time to write some code and prepare for segue. Let's go up to the top here, and inside of our prepare for segue method, we're going to add some code. Our last set of code should be a hint as to the type of code we're going to have to write here. So let's start. We're going to say if sender, and we're going to do some introspection here. We're going to say is kind of class, ns index path class, and we'll add our curly braces. Well, why are we checking that it's an ns index path class? Well, when we performed our segue with identifier, we passed a sender of index path, which happens to be of class ns index path. So we want to make sure that the segue here is from this class. We also want to check that it's the right view controller. However, we haven't imported our space data view controller yet. So let's go to the top here, and let's import our OW space data view controller. And now we can check to make sure that our segue destination is the proper view controller class. So we can type if segue dot destination view controller is kind of class, and we can say OW space data view controller class. And we can add our curly braces. And now inside of this if statement, we're going to be able to write some code. So we check to make sure that the segue's destination view controller is the OW space data view controller, that we're going to the proper view controller. So now let's go ahead and create an instance of our space data view controller. And we'll call this target view controller. And we'll set this equal to our segue dot destination view controller. We also need to get access to our NS index path. And we can call this path, and that's going to be equal to our sender in this case because we passed in NS index path as opposed to our previous example where we passed in a UITableView cell. We also want to get access to our OW space object, and we'll say this is our selected object, and we're going to say self.planet, so we're going to use our literal syntax here, and we're going to be able to say path.row. So we're going to index into our array of planets the same way we did before. Finally, we're going to set our target view controller, which happens to be our OW space data view controller's property of space object equal to our OW space object or selected object variable we just created. So let's type in target view controller dot space object is equal to selected object. So now let's go ahead and run our application. And now when we press the info button, we see a bunch of information about our planet and it's updating properly. Maybe I'll take this application to my next trip to the planetarium and I'll teach the instructor a few things about the planets in our solar system.